Well, Eric, thank you so much for being willing to interview you. I know you have a wealth of information in the area of technology and education. I met you when we were coworkers at Manheim Middle School, and from there we developed a really great friendship where we presented a couple times. We presented at Loyola, we presented at IdeaCon, and we also did a webinar together about 2 years ago, right at the beginning of the pandemic. So I'm so grateful that you're willing to take the time to share your information with my classmates and I about updated information in the area of technology and education.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm glad we're able to work together again.
Great. So please share a little bit about your educational and professional experience with us.
Yeah, so I'll start at the beginning. I was a middle school teacher most of my career. So I worked for a couple of years in CPS as a sixth and seventh grade math and science teacher. And then I worked in Arizona in the Phoenix area for about 8 years, I believe, as a middle school science teacher. Then I came back to Illinois and worked as a STEM educator. And then I worked where we worked together at Manheim. I was a technology learning coach for 4 years there. Uh, Now my current role, which I'm in my second year of, is at the Learning Technology Center of Illinois, which is an ISB program that provides technology services, support, consulting, just about anything ed tech related to schools and to districts and ROEs throughout Illinois. So that's my current role. I'm a national board certified science educator. I have two master's degrees, one in curriculum and instruction and one in educational technology. And I adjunct as an adjunct teacher. Oh my God, an adjunct professor for teachers in both National Louis University and Dominican University. So I teach basically teacher prep courses, science methods and math methods teaching courses, as well as a STEM class I picked up this summer, which was a ton of fun to teach as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, quite a busy person. All right, so tell us a little bit about what are some engaging ways to interact with students when you're teaching a synchronous course.
So for asynchronous, and actually that's a couple of the courses I teach most often are asynchronous. So it's, online course that we don't have a set meeting time. And the students complete the work every week on their own schedule with a weekly deadline. So a couple of things that are important, making myself a real person and making myself accessible to them. And one way that I do that is recording a video every week. And even though assignments are posted for them, there's a difference between just reading some instructions that one person wrote versus hearing that person explain them and give details and give tips and talk about what past students have struggled with. And I feel like doing that recording every week and giving them 10 to 15 minutes of really, the closest thing to personal time with me, or like in a direct conversation with me. I've gotten a lot of good feedback from students on how helpful that is, and I get better work back as a result because I'm not leaving the interpretation up to the words on the screen. I'm actually explaining it to them and I'm showing them examples. I like that better too because I can show examples of past work without just giving them the file, which I don't always want to do for a variety of reasons. And so I like being able to walk them through things on the screen. The other thing that so there's a couple of points there. That's one. The second one is giving them voice as well. So I find that it's very easy to not really even know who the students are that you're teaching if you don't give them an opportunity to present themselves. Oh, sorry, getting a call, declining. A couple of ways that you can give them voice with technology. There's tools such as Flipgrid. There's tools such as Screencastify or Loom that will let them record their screen, but giving them an assignment where they're asked to share something on video themselves gives you even that brief snippet. If it's 5-10 minutes of them talking, you get to know who that person is and you get to know who's on the other side of that computer. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Yeah, and so I like doing that. I also like giving the option anytime students have to write something, if it's appropriate, I like giving them the option to record it instead of just turning in a paper or turning in a presentation. I like to push them to try and record themselves presenting the information. I find that also makes, it makes them better presenters, which is oftentimes part of what we're asking them to do in their job anyway. But it also gives me better work because, for a PowerPoint presentation or slides they're going to turn in, I don't want them dumping all the information on a slide. I want them to give key points and then I want them to present it. And
Mm.
so that makes them better presenters and better slides creators. So just those couple of things I think help give them a voice and give them an opportunity to be present in the class more so than just, a name at the other end of a assignment turned in.
I have
The
a
other,
question for
yeah,
you.
sorry, go ahead.
Uh, by the way, great content. When you're recording videos for students, which apps or platforms do you use to record yourself?
Yeah, so I personally have a Mac, and so I use the built-in QuickTime recording that's on the Mac. I'm willing to bet there's probably a Windows equivalent. Or you could just use if you're on a Chromebook, you can use just the camera app and record yourself. You could just use your phone and record yourself as well. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. There are a couple of apps out there you can use that are freemium, meaning you can use them in part for free, but you have to pay for certain other services. I think I mentioned a couple: Screencastify, Screencast-O-Matic, Loom, and WeVideo also. If you want to do a little more video editing, those are the four big ones I think that are out there. Most of them have a limit, I think, of like 5 minutes of screen recording, which can be good because now you're forced to kind of condense everything down. But if you're really doing an overview of the week's assignments, a lot of times you're not getting into any greater detail in those 5 minutes than what was already in the assignment. And that's why I like using my own recording tool that doesn't have a limit on it. And then I usually just upload those to YouTube. I set them as unlisted, which means no one will find them unless they have the link. And then I just send the link out to the students, or I'll put them in a playlist and then I can send the YouTube playlist out to them so that they have that as well.
Great. And so with Flipgrid, I was watching a tutorial video and I came across the information stating that if you are an educator or if you have a school email, you have unlimited access to Flipgrid. Is that correct? Do you know by any chance?
Yes, so Flipgrid is owned by Microsoft, and they have made it open, free to all teachers forever.
Mm.
And I don't even know if you need an educator account because I use Flipgrid for my university courses. I actually use my personal account for
Mhm.
Flipgrid, and I've never ran into any limits or any paid anything. So yeah, it's totally that's a great platform to use because it's so totally free and it's all designed to submit and receive video recordings all within the app. So you have a dashboard where you see everybody's submission all at once.
Great. And then when you ask your students to create PowerPoint presentations, are there go-to websites where you like visually the presentations that have been created already for you?
Um, I'd say in terms of like templates for them, I would
Mhm.
say Slides Mania is my go-to. Um, Slides Carnival is a good one, but Slides Mania I think is newer, fresher, and has a lot of really good content up there for free. So yeah, those are my go-tos usually. I always tell my students though, like, don't obsess over the details of how it looks. Like, definitely grab one of those templates and just run with it and focus on your content.
Absolutely. Now tell me a little bit about what do you do when you're teaching synchronously?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing with synchronous is I go back to this phrase, and that is when we get together, do the things that can only be done together. And I think we've all been in a meeting that we realize at the end could have been an email, right? And so I never want my class time to end up feeling like that, where it's like, okay, I could have, if you're just spending, 30 minutes talking, you can outsource yourself to YouTube. Like, there's no reason for someone to show up to class and spend that time just listening to you talk. So the heart of that is flipping learning. So anything that you need to give them, where it's you lecturing or it's reading something, watching a video, if at all possible, give it to them as homework leading up to the course and then use it, or leading up to the in-person time and then use it in that in-person time. For the in-person time, I would say there's not that you can't give them an article to read, a shorter one to read on the spot and discuss, because sometimes having just read it is valuable. But I'd say, especially in terms of you talking on stage, I'd say no more than 10 minutes
Mhm.
continuously and 5 ideally, right? Break up what you want to share with them and give them something to do during that time. Give them activities. The easiest way I found when I'm teaching teachers to do this with their students is I tell them, make a T-chart, simple T-chart. The left side, put teacher. On the right side, put student. And list all the activities incrementally in 5-minute blocks or 10-minute blocks, and write down what the teacher and what the student's going to be doing in those 5 or 10 minutes, all the way down through the entire class.
Mhm.
And that simple process is eye-opening for a lot of them, and they start to realize that if that teacher side is really heavy and the student side just keeps saying things like listens, there's an imbalance there, and they need to be doing the heavy lifting, and that'll help engage them more. And so one of the things we do is just say, it's okay if there's a lot of information for them to process from you, but give them ways to process it. Include discussion, include interaction, have a plan for how they're going to take any notes, have them create and make something during that time. So if they're just intaking information, see if you could find ways for them to create something with that time or discuss something with that time. And I can give examples of that if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, so assuming are we talking like virtual synchronous time? So like over Zoom type of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, so a couple of things I would plan for. One is use breakout rooms, but use them intelligently. Give them expectations on what to do or produce while in that breakout room. So don't just throw them in breakout rooms and say, all right, talk about this question, but say, I want you to discuss this question. I want you to come back with 5 ideas, or I want you to come back with 3 ideas and 2 questions. And you can even give them a template, like give them a Word doc, give them a shared Google slide, give them a place where they're going to collect their thoughts while they're in that time. And that way, when you come back together, now you've got something tangible, one, for accountability, that they use the time well. And 2, you've got a lot of discussion points there for you to be able to talk about whole group. And now you can share out, and everyone who's in separate breakout rooms can hear what each other has to say. If you can give them like a shared doc of some kind to put that all in, it's super helpful for facilitating that.
That's great. So I know that you have also created resources for educators, and I want to say you have a website out there too. What kind of resources have you developed to assist educators throughout Illinois and nationwide?
Yeah, I don't know that I'd say I have resources specifically for these kind of situations. Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know that I have anything per se. I
Okay,
did have the website. You probably know the blog. I've kind of abandoned that a little bit. I hate to say, but I've gotten a little too busy to maintain it. I can give you some good educators to follow for things like that.
sure. And do share your website, because even though you haven't updated it in a little bit of time, it still has great content. So what's the name of your website?
Yeah, it's betterteaching.org was the name of the site. And it just links to a blog. When I was a classroom technology coach, I would just post weekly tech tips and I'd throw them into the blog. And before you know it, it just kept growing and growing. Like I said, I haven't had a ton of time to maintain it. And there's other great stuff out there. A couple of names I would throw out there that I would have you look up as well. Uh,
Mhm.
all great Erics stick together, right? So Eric Kurtz, Curts is his last name. He is the Google guy, but he's got amazing like just ed tech tips in general.
Is
Um,
he on Twitter?
he's on Twitter. He's on all the platforms. His site is Control Alt Learn or something like that. But if you look up Eric Kurtz, you'll find him. Another one is Richard Byrne, Byrne, and he has a site called Free Technology for Teachers. And he's been doing this for over a decade, where he sends out a weekly, almost daily tips, I might think, and then weekly and monthly wrap ups. And he's just got an amazing wealth of resource for any content you're teaching. And the last one I'd throw out there that's not per se like ed tech, but it's just good teaching strategy in general, is Cult of Pedagogy with now I'm drawing a blank on her name, so I'm going to Google it while we're talking. But Cult of Pedagogy is an amazing educational site that I've been following for over a decade, and I've like put into use many things that she's got there. Jennifer Gonzalez, that's her name.
Okay.
You can find her and follow a lot of her articles and her social media feeds and her podcast. She's got just great teaching resources and philosophy in general.
Wow, that's good to know. And are there specific conferences that you attend regularly that you find helpful as an educator?
Yeah, there's a bunch. So the LTC where I work actually holds several. Just last week, we just missed it, was IETC, Illinois Educational Technology Conference down in Springfield. So mark your calendars for next year. It's usually in the first week of November. That's a great experience. Yeah, and then we run EdTech Next, which is out in Galena, Illinois. It's kind of a retreat / conference. It's a great time, a lot of good EdTech stuff going on there. And then we host a virtual conference, DigLitCon, Digital Literacy Conference. And that also just passed in September. but you can
Mhm.
look those up and find them. Additionally, outside of what we host, IdeaCon in February is pretty much the big education and technology conference in the Chicagoland area, at least. So I would recommend going to that in February, and I'm pretty sure registration is still open. I'll be presenting there, so it's a good time. And then
What's your topic
nationally,
on? Sorry
what's
to cut
that?
you off. What's your topic on?
I've got a couple. I'm doing a 3D printing workshop,
Okay.
2-hour workshop teaching teachers how to 3D print. And then I've got, I think, one on coaching. I got to look. Clearly I haven't gotten. February is like 50 years away right now, but I know I've got presentations. I think one's on coaching and another one might be on Google Tools.
Wonderful. That's
Yeah.
good to know. And you were going to share another resource? I'm sorry, I cut you
Yeah,
off.
the ISTE conference, that is the big educational technology conference yearly. That's a national conference, and that is huge. I mean, I went this past year in New Orleans, and it was like, I think 8,000 people registered, something like that.
Mhm.
And it's in Philadelphia this next year, so definitely one to check out. And I'm trying to think what else locally. There's RSAC, which is at the same place as IdeaCon in Schaumburg. Not as big of an audience, but it's not tech focused. It's more just teaching, uh,
Mhm.
education focused, and that's coming up in 1 month in December.
Wow, great to know. Um, and so you shared conferences. Are there any upcoming webinars that you highly recommend for us?
Yes, and I can send you some links, but the LTC themselves, my organization hosts webinars at least weekly, if not like several
Oh,
per
wow.
week. Yeah, so there we have some great webinars. IDEA is another ed tech organization in Illinois, and their webinars are good as well. And then outside of Illinois, one of my favorite ones is TCEA. That's, I don't know what it stands for. It's Texas something. I'm sure educator is the E. But TCEA is I actually just registered for another one of theirs. They have these really good lunch and learn webinars,
Okay.
which are like 30 minutes at 12 o'clock, and you just sit and eat your lunch and learn something really good. And I found the content is really excellent there for educators.
Wow, this is wonderful. You shared so much information in such a short period of time, and I appreciate it. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that perhaps I didn't ask you, but it's important for us to know as educators and future professors in the field of social work and applying technology?
Yes, absolutely. I would say, so one thing that I'll jump in there with a couple of key points. Be intentional with resources that you share to students, especially for assignments. One of the big phrases that comes to mind is curate, don't dump. Um, so like when you have a wealth of knowledge on some topic, right? It's easy to just dump 20 links and
Mhm.
say, please review 2 or 3 of these or what have you. And I'd say that's a tough task for a student to take on. Curate your best resource and be intentional about what they should do with that resource. So read these 2 articles and write a paper on this, or reflect on this specifically and cite the source. You don't want to overload them with resources and then have no accountability for whether or not they read them and to what degree of depth. So just be intentional about what you curate for them and what they're supposed to do, what action they should take with that specific resource. So quality over quantity. The other thing I'll get on my soapbox slightly here about is when we're talking about online learning is discussion boards. It can be
Yes.
a controversial topic amongst professors and students as well. The biggest tip I'd give there, regardless of what you feel about them, is give them open-ended questions. Give them some friendly controversy. The biggest challenge I see with online discussion boards is that they sometimes turn into a essay in disguise. So to give you an example, like let's say I'm giving my students a discussion board topic on science assessment, how to assess students in a science classroom. I wouldn't want to post an article about science assessment and then ask them a question to say, why is science assessment important? So that might seem open-ended because it has the word why, but if they're basing it on this 1 or 2 articles they just read, they're all going to write the same thing. They're going to cite the text, they're going to come to the same conclusion, and there is a right answer because I've provided them a resource with the right answer. However, if I give them a science topic and I'd say, how would you assess to this standard based on the activities they just did? What would your rubric look like and why? Now I'm going to get 20 different answers. And I've created a little friendly controversy because there's different ways to write a rubric. There's differences in opinion on how to assess. Do I include spelling and grammar in that, or do I just focus on the science? Should I have them draw, write, both? So if you can create some friendly controversy where you're going to get genuinely different answers, and people are going to be able to reply with their own opinion, and that's when they're going to learn and grow, and they're going to be engaged. If you write a question where there is really truly just a right answer, not only is that tough to see if it's tough to generate discussion, because what does somebody reply to that with? There's no disagreement. They're just going to say something kind of blank like, yeah, I really agree with that. I also think that writing a rubric and giving it to your students is important. And they're just going to agree with everything. I want them to disagree a little bit. I want them to have different opinions. So I try to foster that with the questions that I ask. All right, I'm going to step off my soapbox on discussion boards now, but I had to include that.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you shared that, because that does happen and we use Sakai at Loyola, and a lot of times if you provide a question, students just tend to recite the articles that they read about and not using additional resources or their own opinion. So I'm glad that you touched on that piece. Very important. Well, I appreciate the time that you spent with me just sharing all these resources. I look forward to sharing this information to my classmates. I believe